So I will get to some of that, starting with Heem here. He's a YouTuber and streamer as well, saying, "Wow, so cool and brave. I'm sure this will convince ones of people to join and support your tomato soup movement." So this is a lot of the opinion being put out there that this is not going to help them at all in getting people on board. I would argue that we already have people. You don't need people to join the climate movement. I'm going to get some polling here in a second. The barrier to progress on the climate against the climate crisis is not the public. It's politicians and massive oil companies. So, you can, I think, correctly argue that this one action is not going to change that. But also, I don't think that was the goal of this one action. Nobody is claiming that throwing soup on Van Gogh is going to save the climate. And that's some of the, some of the dumbest shit that I've seen in terms of arguments against this. There are fair arguments against this, as I will get to, but that is a dumb argument. That was not the goal of this. It's just all of a sudden solve the climate crisis. So no, obviously that's not going to happen. But in terms of where people are, so poll after poll after, all data shows that the majority of people already support some real movement on climate change. So this is from Yale. Most registered voters would prefer to vote for a candidate who supports action on global warming. So they have 58% support here, with 25% saying it doesn't matter either way. Pew Research, 2/3 of Americans think government should do more on climate. This is from 2020. This is Data for Progress. A majority of voters support the Green New Deal. And what I like about Data for Progress is they are specific in terms of how they ask the question. So they are very clear about what the Green New Deal is, what it would do in terms of creating more good-paying jobs, union jobs, while also addressing the climate crisis and bringing down the use of fossil fuels. So they're clear about what this means. And when they are clear about that, you have a majority of support. So 60% support the Green New Deal here as well. So the barrier, again, is not the public. It's politicians and massive oil companies. Now, you could argue that maybe this will shave off a few people from supporting climate change. But if throwing soup on a painting all of a sudden makes you not want to do anything about the climate, then maybe you were never really in support of the climate to begin with. So I just think, if this turns you into a Republican or something, then you should be checking yourself, because you're the one that's being ridiculous. But this is from what I've seen. I'll get to more arguments here, but from what I have read, the best argument against this action. So Matt Boers here, who is a artist, writes here, false choice, replying to what is worth more, art or life. He says, false choice, anti-art nonsense, and dangerous given fascism has positioned itself as the savior of Western civilization and the Enlightenment. I think this is the best point against this action. There are many targets that they could have had, and they just Stop Oil have had many other targets, including, actual oil companies. Targeting art, I don't think is really the best optics for them. That said, when we get to optics, is it really about, winning people over? But he makes the point that this can potentially turn people onto the idea that the ones on the right, that conservatives are actually correct, because here you have people that, ostensibly are on the left, essentially, attempting to just destroy civilization or output from Western civilization like art, which again, it's not destroyed. It's behind a pane of glass. But the initial reaction that people have from seeing this, yes, I think can turn people off, not off necessarily to the arguments around the climate crisis, but off to this entire movement or, the politics that they align with. So I think that is a legitimate fear, and I think this is a good criticism. That said, let's get to Morgan Page here, who writes, the painting is protected by glass, so everyone can calm down. It's a great attention-grabbing scene within the context of galleries that are funded by BP and other oil interests. Abby Wilkinson here writes, think there's an obvious logic to climate activists desecrating irreplaceable things of immense value. Their whole point is we're doing exactly that to our entire biosphere. Also a headlines by any means necessary desperation, I guess. And she goes on to write, I do basically think history will remember the people who tried more kindly than the rest of us if history persists. And I think she is absolutely right about this. You know, these activists right now are much hated by many people, but is this really going to seem like a big deal in 20, 30, 40 years if this issue of the climate crisis was never properly dealt with? I don't think they're going to be the enemy. And that also gets back to, look, even if you want to be angry about this, mad about this, I hope you save more of your rage for oil executives, for oil companies that have stolen millions in government subsidies. Now, yes, they didn't steal them. Politicians worked in tandem with them, but that have taken all that public money, that have destroyed the earth in a variety of ways. Their actions have led to ongoing extreme weather that have directly destroyed the lives of people, millions of people. I hope you save more of your rage for that than for these two climate activists that threw soup at a pane of glass in front of a Van Gogh painting. I just think it's important to have that context, even if you want to be angry about this. Going on here, Lauren says, I don't really think it's worth getting that worked up about this stuff if you're not personally willing to go to jail for something more effective. Just my opinion. Going on to say, quoting the argument that this will make people hostile to more effective climate protests. Responding, saying, bro, if throwing soup on a painting makes a reactionary hostile to climate protests, they are really going to hate something that actually makes a difference. Another good point. And also, look, there is no correct way to do a protest. Protests are going to piss people off. People marching in the streets, you know, impacting traffic. That gets people angry. So the whole point here is to get people talking about an issue, get people aware of an issue. And considering there is no real damage done here, again, the painting is not damaged. The painting is fine. I don't understand all of the rage around this, though I do understand the initial reaction to seeing this and thinking the painting is destroyed. But once it's explained, I don't think it makes much sense to have all that much rage. Again, especially considering where a lot of your rage should be placed. Winter Girl writes here, art is a reflection of life. The preservation of art isn't what is stopping us from preserving the climate, and I don't like the insinuation of pitting art and artists against the environment as if the two are somehow at odds. My only point here is I don't think this is really an attack on art or Van Gogh. This is an attack, like, they didn't go there to attack Van Gogh. This is to make a point about why are we so protective of art while we are not protecting the climate. Now, again, I agree it shouldn't be an either or. You can protect art and protect the climate. But the greater point here is you can do both. If you're so protective over pieces of art, then maybe you should also be aware and protective of the people that are generating the art, of the planet that they're living on. So, yeah. Also going on to say here, the only reaction I think will ever come of this is increased security at art museums and continuing inaction on climate. You know, in terms of the direct impact, I do think this is true. Yeah, there will likely be increased security there. Of course, as I said earlier, this one action is not going to save the climate. So yeah, there's likely going to be continuing inaction on climate. But it's about the entirety of protests and the prolonged fight in this movement, not about, you know, individual actions. I mean, go back to any movement, civil rights, gay rights, the amount of action that was taken, protests that happened that pissed people off are countless. But that was all in the entire movement of eventually getting to a place where there was some successes, some actual victories. So, you know, I think getting hung up on individual actions that may piss some people off is kind of missing the forest or the trees. Mary Hegler here says, if you're going to have a climate protest at a museum, I feel like it ought to be about returning stolen art/artifacts to colonized nations and pointing out the connections between climate change and colonialism, not this. I think this is a fair point. Max Berger here writes, at Momentum, a social movement training organization, we teach organizers that the keys to a successful protest tactic are disruption and or sacrifice. This tactic requires no sacrifice on the part of the participants, nor does it materially or symbolically disrupt oppression. They were arrested. So, I mean, I guess you can argue what counts as sacrifice, but they were arrested over doing this. And in terms of it doesn't symbolically disrupt oppression, I mean, again, there's a point. I played the video for you. The point is, why are we protecting art and not protecting the planet? So there is some